Hello. Today I'm going to look at putting together an automatic watering system. The first question to ask is, why do we want an automatic watering system? Well, the first obvious answer is it saves an awful lot of time and effort to ensure that the garden is watered. But another reason may be simply we're not available or capable of watering the garden. Maybe we're at work, or in my case, it's to cover that period when I'm not available. I'm on holiday, for example. The rest of the time, I water by hand, water that has been collected from rainwater. So we've got the why. So let's look at some of the different systems that exist. The first system I want to look at is the good old sprinkler. Now this is a high pressure system. We need a certain pressure of water so that the sprinkler can eject jets of water over the area that we need to water. Now it has a couple of obvious disadvantages. One is it uses an awful lot of water, and water is a precious resource that we need to economize. And the other thing is it waters the leaves of the plants that are being watered. Now in the case of a lawn, that's not really a problem, but if we're using it for watering things like tomato plants, that may well encourage fungal diseases on the leaves of the tomato plants. So, a couple of things to consider there. The next system I'm going to look at is the drip irrigation system. Now this basically is where we have hoses which run next to our plants. It's kind of what I call medium pressure system. We need enough pressure to get the water pushed down these hoses to, again, pass by these little holes which are basically next to each plant we want watered. Now, each of these holes has a thing called an emitter, or simply a gizmo to you and me, which controls the volume of water which is going to the roots of that plant. So the advantage here is we economize water, and water only goes where there are holes which are directly next to plants that we want watered. Of course, the disadvantage is if we forget to put a hole in the right place and there's a plant growing somewhere where there isn't a hole, it's going to suffer from a lack of water. But again, a good system, just a little bit complicated to set up because you need to know exactly where the plants are that need watering. Okay, so now let's look at the third system, which is one I'm going to look at in a lot more detail today. The last system I'm going to look at today is the system I'm going to set up, which is the soaker hose system. Now, the soaker hose is simply a length of tubing, pipe, hose, which is porous, and so the water, as the name suggests, soaks out of the hose. It seeps out, it oozes out, it doesn't come out in any kind of jet like our sprinklers, and it certainly isn't focused in any one point like with the drip irrigation system. So this system has the advantage that it's actually a low pressure system. You can run it off things like water butts behind me or other things. I'm going to actually run it off the mains water supply because it is to cover just holiday periods, and it will allow water to seep out all along its length, so it's not targeted and focused like the drip irrigation system. So that's what I'm going to set up. So let's take a look at what we need to set up the system. So what do we need to set up our automatic watering system? Well, the first thing is a supply of water. So you can have a lake, a pond, a stream, some kind of water collecting system where you've got big barrels full of water, or you can simply have an outdoor tap with either collected water or mains water. The choice is yours, and that's down to you to see. Here I'm just going to use the outdoor tap of my house because, as I said, this system is simply to cover those occasions when I'm not around, which is pretty rare. Most of the time I'm collecting rainwater and watering by hand. So let's have a look at some of the kit we need. So in its simplest form, we need some form of timer mechanism. Most of them today are electronic and they work on batteries, but there are all types, so it's really a question of personal choice. The other thing, of course, is the hose. Here we have this special porous hose that I'm going to use in my garden, and you're also going to need lots of these, lots of different types of connectors. In fact, you're going to need a lot. I've even had to order some more because I have a lot of these, but I think I'm going to need even more for this operation. There are a few other things that you can add to your list. For example, a water filter. This timer here automatically has a water filter inside. It comes with the water filter, but particularly if you're using collected water, you may want to put some kind of filter in place somewhere in the system, preferably before the water gets to this timer mechanism. Another thing I am going to use in my garden is this. It's called a hose distributor or a hose splitter, which means that from one supply of water I can in fact run a number of different hoses off here for different areas of my garden. So there we are. That's the kit. Now all we need to do is put it all together. Setup is now finished. Here we have our tap, which is connected to our timer. I put a little bit of hose here and connected it to our hose splitter, hose distributor here, and then it goes off down this hose, which is a normal hose, down to the porous hose at the end where we actually want to water our plants. Now I've done a little schematic, so let's take a quick look at that. So again, we start with the tap, or the faucet if you want, followed by the timer mechanism. Then I've got a little bit of hose joining the hose splitter distributor, and then onto the hose, which then leads out to the raised bed where I have the porous hose. So let's go and take a look at the other end. Here we are at the business end of things. We have a bit of normal garden hose here, which isn't porous, it's just serving to transport the water over the parts of the garden we don't want to water, and it's joined here with a connection to our porous hose. One thing to keep this in place, good idea, is to use these things. If you've got pegs, pins or stakes, for example tent pegs or something like that, it's a good idea to use this to hold your hose in place so it doesn't move around when it's under pressure from water. Now let's look at our hose here. Now the hose will just simply leak water. What you're looking for is little beads of water on the surface. Remember, the end needs to be closed. We don't want water gushing out of the end. We want the water to come through the walls of the hose. And if you see jets of water coming out of here, this simply means the pressure is too high. You need to lower the pressure because in fact you will damage your hose. The idea is the water just oozes out of the sides of the hose. And as I said, you just look for these little beads of water. One thing, if you've got a mulch, put it just under the mulch. Here it's above so that you can see it for demonstration purposes, but normally you put it just under the mulch and the water will then leak into the soil and not be evaporated by the sun. So there we have it. We've looked at different types of watering systems, and we've looked at how to put in a soaker hose system in the garden. So now we know all we need to know, so it's just a question of turning on the water.